In a world of hyperconnectivity, we seem more disconnected than ever from the living world. A world of natural wonder that has its own systems in place and masters the art of coexistence. We, humans, have placed ourselves outside this way of living, but it can teach us the biggest lessons and leave us in awe. What happens when we reconnect to the nature from which we arose, move in sync with it and coexist in a symbiotic way? Will we make other decisions? Will it change the way we perceive ourselves? What and who can teach us if we are willing to listen? We invite you to be open and amazed by today's guests as they offer a glimpse into their art of coexistence. You're about to listen to a short clip from a previous conversation. For the full episode, go to our podcast channel.
I had an appetite for knowledge in general. Whether that came from one place or another really didn't matter to me. I never felt limited in searching for it in a specific place. So when I started university, I not only didn't particularly like the feel of how the making was structured necessarily, and the lack of camaraderie that I could see, that it sort of, I think, predisposed me to look elsewhere. So my friends were not in the arts a lot. And they were scientists, they were studying biology in different fields. So this sort of made my environment more multidisciplinary than most people would. When I think back, I recognize I was learning a lot in the arts, and part of the process that I was learning was when you start a project and you are proposed an idea to develop, you need to look for knowledge about that idea in every field that you can. So this for me is very much an artistic methodology that I was taught very early in my academic years. You're proposed a subject like all of your colleagues, and I suppose the difference was that when I was searching for knowledge, I would go to philosophy, I would go to art theory, I would go to art history, but I would also go to the more science fields to understand if there was knowledge there that I could explore the theme with. And I suppose that was the main difference between me and my colleagues in the output that I came out with. I think the challenges for me with the scientists were I had to learn to ask a lot more questions, that the mechanisms and the questions within science are often not very easy to process for someone who's more literate in the humanities. But I guess for me, I was doing this more or less at the same time, and in a time of my life that I was very much focused on learning. So it was not very complicated to do. And I suppose that did help not get into cul-de-sacs, pockets that would trap me.
I understand, yeah. And I think this is what you mean when you say the research you do is always, it's art-based research, meaning you can explore lots of different disciplines to go deeper into a certain theme that you want to express. Whereas if you do this within a discipline, you're always limited. Is that what you mean with the art-based research?
I suppose so. It's just, I don't know how to say it any other way. For me, making an art project, I was taught to make an art project by starting with research. And I recognize in colleagues that have never worked with biology or sciences before, I recognize that methodology. We just go into different books, for instance, okay? We read different books. I read scientific papers to look for the concepts that they're working with, and they go into most art theory or philosophy, or I don't know even which kind of books they go into. But when colleagues of mine are developing a project, they bring me, oh, have you read this article? It's more often than not about from art theory pocket. And when I'm looking into a concept, I unavoidably go, okay, this sounds really interesting. Maybe genetics or biochemistry has a really interesting way to...
And to approach it from a different angle. Yeah, I see. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that you sometimes say that philosophy wasn't your thing, or that it hasn't been philosophical. Whereas for me, everything that I see what you've been doing is all about asking questions, which philosophy is also about, just asking questions and trying to understand who we are and why we do what we do. And I love to dig deeper into a few of your projects, just to give that a bit more, to explain it a little bit better. But what I also wanted to ask you is that you have on your website a bioart manifest. I think that is great to have for any art discipline, but for any topic in general, it's good to have some statutes in how you perceive it to be. Can you tell me how this manifesto came to life, who you wrote it with, and why this group of people felt the necessity to write it?
Of course. So the BioArt Manifesto was actually relatively recent, especially if you think of when the people that signed it actually started doing this. It came very late in our process. And I think for every one of us, there's a slightly different reason why we decided to sign it. And I also kind of want to include the people that didn't sign it into this conversation, because just the same way that I had my reasons to sign it, there were reasons for people who didn't sign it not to sign it, even though they were somewhat involved in the process. So I think the main question for me it has to do with what I was telling you earlier, which is the definition of bioart is a complicated one. It should be a complicated one. It shouldn't be fixed. And it's one of the things that I appreciate more when you talk about contemporary art and when you talk about an experimental part of contemporary art, is that it's important for you to define how you see it as an artist if you're working in that field, because it will allow people to understand and to contextualize your work within what your parameters are when you're making work and when you're presenting work.
You are listening to a short clip from a previous conversation. For the full episode, go to our podcast channel. Thank you for listening to The Art of Coexistence, a podcast produced by Ourcelium Publishers. Editing by Axel Frühmann, music by Mark Omen, and hosted by me, Daphne Frühmann. Find us on your favorite podcast app and give us a follow, like, subscribe, and/or share, and we'll see you again soon.